1945, August 21st. A young physicist named Harry Daghlian drops a brick. Just a small piece of tungsten carbide slipping from his fingers. It falls onto a sphere of plutonium the size of a grapefruit. The room flashes blue. No explosion, no fire, just the demon opening its eyes. Harry felt the dragon's breath pass through his body, invisible, silent, already destroying him from the inside. He took 28 days to die. 9 months later, in the same room, Louis Slotin saw the same blue flash, same sphere, same demon. He lasted 9 days. 2 men who played God and woke the demon. Both absorbed more radiation than standing 1 kilometer from Hiroshima. They called it the Demon Core. This is the true story. Radiation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't burn like fire. It doesn't cut like a blade. It passes through your body like a ghost through a wall. Silent, invisible, untouchable. You don't feel it entering. You don't feel it leaving. But in the seconds it takes to pass through you, it tears apart millions of molecular bonds. It shatters your DNA. It punches holes in the machinery that keeps your cells alive. And by the time you realize something is wrong, the damage is already done. You're not dying. You're already dead. Your body just hasn't received the memo yet. They called it Rufus, a nickname for a ball of plutonium-239 that weighed 6.2 kilograms, about the size of a grapefruit, warm to the touch from its own radioactive decay. It was the 3rd core, built for a bomb that was never dropped. After Hiroshima, after Nagasaki. The war ended before Rufus could be used. So instead of vaporizing a city, it sat in a laboratory in Los Alamos, waiting. The scientists treated it almost like a pet. They handled it with their bare hands. They didn't yet understand that Rufus was not a pet. It was a predator, and it was patient. The experiments were called tickling the dragon's tail. The scientists would bring the plutonium core closer and closer to criticality, the point where a nuclear chain reaction becomes self-sustaining. They used reflectors, materials that would bounce neutrons back into the core, increasing the reaction. Get it right, and you collect valuable data. Get it wrong, and you unleash the dragon. Richard Feynman watched these experiments and called them playing Russian roulette with the atom. But the scientists kept playing. They were confident. They were skilled. They were winning. Until they weren't. August 21st, 1945, a Tuesday night. The war had just ended. Japan surrendered 6 days earlier. Most of Los Alamos was celebrating. But Harry Daghlian wasn't at the party. He was in the laboratory, alone, at night, violating safety protocols that required a second person present. He wanted to finish one more experiment, just one more. The core sat on its table, surrounded by tungsten carbide bricks, each one weighing 4.4 kilograms. Harry was building a reflector around the plutonium, brick by brick, measuring how close he could get to criticality. He had done it many times before. He knew the limits, or so he thought. Harry was 24 years old, brilliant, one of the youngest physicists on the Manhattan Project. He had helped build the bombs that ended the war. Now he was alone with the 3rd core, stacking bricks in the quiet of the night. The neutron counters clicked steadily as he worked. Each brick he added reflected more neutrons back into the plutonium. The count climbed higher. He was getting close. One more brick. The counter clicked faster. He picked up the final brick and began to move it over the assembly. Then he saw it. The neutron count was rising too fast. He was about to go critical. Harry's instincts kicked in. He saw the danger on the counters. His hand was already pulling back, already trying to move the brick away from the assembly. But tungsten carbide is heavy. 4.4 kilograms of dense metal balanced in one hand. And in that fraction of a second, as his muscles tensed to pull away, the brick slipped. It didn't fall far, just a few centimeters, but it fell onto the center of the assembly, onto the plutonium core. And in that instant, the dragon woke up. The brick completed the reflector. Neutrons that had been escaping were suddenly bouncing back into the core. The plutonium went supercritical. In less than a second, 10 trillion fissions occurred. The core released a burst of radiation, neutrons and gamma rays erupting outward in all directions. And Harry was standing right there, his hand still reaching toward the assembly, his body absorbing the invisible fire. For a split second, the air itself glowed blue. Cherenkov radiation, the eerie light produced when particles travel faster than light can move through a medium. It was beautiful. And it was a death sentence. Harry didn't freeze. He didn't run. He reached forward and pushed the brick off the assembly with his bare hand, the same hand that had dropped it. He disassembled the reflector, brick by brick, to stop the reaction and protect anyone who might come after him. Only then did he step back. Only then did he allow himself to understand what had just happened. He had seen the blue flash. He had felt the heat on his skin. He knew exactly what it meant. Harry Daghlian was 24 years old, and he had just killed himself. The first thing Harry noticed was the taste. A strange, metallic flavor spreading across his tongue, like he had just licked a battery. It was the radiation ionizing the fluids in his mouth. His body was already screaming at him in the only language it knew. But Harry didn't need the warning. He already knew. He had seen the blue flash. He had felt the heat. Now he was tasting his own death. Harry wasn't completely alone that night. A security guard was stationed nearby. His job was to watch the plutonium, not to understand the experiments. When the blue flash lit up the room, he didn't know what it meant. But he saw Harry's face. He saw the fear. The guard received about 50 rem of radiation that night. Enough to make him sick. Not enough to kill him. Harry had absorbed more than 10 times that amount. The guard would survive. Harry would not. The official report would later calculate Harry's dose, 510 rem of neutron and gamma radiation. To understand what that means, consider this. 400 rem is usually fatal. Harry had exceeded the lethal threshold by more than 20%. But radiation death is not like a bullet. It doesn't kill you instantly. It starts a clock. And Harry's clock had just started ticking. He had days, maybe weeks, but the outcome was already decided. The radiation had already shattered his DNA, already poisoned his bone marrow, already begun the slow collapse of every system in his body. Harry walked out of that laboratory under his own power. He could still move, still think, still speak. To anyone who didn't know what had happened, he might have looked perfectly normal. But Harry knew the truth. He was already dead. His body just hadn't caught up yet. The radiation had done its work in less than a second. Now his cells were failing, one by one, like lights going out in an empty building. He was a dead man walking, and he knew it. Within hours, the symptoms began. Nausea, vomiting, a burning sensation spreading across his right hand, the hand that had pushed the brick away. The skin was already starting to redden, like a severe sunburn. But this wasn't sunburn. This was radiation destroying the tissue from the inside. Harry was taken to the hospital at Los Alamos. The doctors examined him, measured his vital signs, and tried to calculate exactly how much radiation he had received. They already knew the prognosis. They just didn't want to say it out loud. Harry's family was contacted. His parents, his sister. They were told there had been an accident. They were told to come to Los Alamos as quickly as possible. What they weren't told, at least not immediately, was that their son was already dying. That the brilliant 24-year-old physicist who had helped end the war had just become one of its final casualties. The army flew them in. They arrived to find Harry conscious, alert, even optimistic. He didn't look like a dying man. Not yet. First week was deceptive. Harry was sick, yes, nauseous, weak, his hand blistering and red. But he was alive. He could talk. He could think. He even smiled at his family when they arrived. The doctors monitored him around the clock, measuring his blood counts, tracking the damage. They watched the numbers drop day by day. White blood cells falling, platelets disappearing. His body's ability to heal itself was being erased. But Harry didn't feel it yet. He felt sick, but not dying. That was the cruelest part. The doctors had a name for what came next: the walking ghost phase. For a few days, sometimes a week, radiation victims seem to improve. The nausea fades, the mind clears. They talk, they laugh, they make plans for the future. It's the body's last desperate lie, a final moment of hope before the collapse. Harry experienced this. He sat up in bed. He joked with visitors. He talked about going back to work. But the doctors knew what his blood tests showed. His bone marrow was already dead. His body just hadn't realized it yet. By the second week, the illusion shattered. Harry's white blood cell count collapsed to almost nothing. Without white blood cells, the body cannot fight infection. A simple cold becomes pneumonia. A small cut becomes a deadly wound. Harry's immune system was gone. His body was now an open door for every bacteria, every virus, every threat it had spent a lifetime learning to fight. And his hand, the hand that had touched the plutonium, was getting worse. The skin was dying, turning black at the edges. The radiation had killed the tissue so thoroughly that it couldn't even rot properly. Radiation doesn't just burn the skin, it burns everything. Harry's internal organs were failing, one by one. His intestinal lining, the delicate tissue that absorbs nutrients, was disintegrating. He couldn't keep food down. His body was consuming itself, desperately searching for energy it could no longer absorb. The doctors called it a three-dimensional sunburn. Most burns damage the surface, but Harry was burned all the way through. Every organ, every tissue, every cell that the radiation had touched was now dying. He was dissolving from the inside out. By day 20, Harry could barely speak. The pain was constant now, a deep, burning agony that no medication could touch. His body had become a prison of failing systems. His kidneys were shutting down. His heart was struggling to pump blood that was too thin, too depleted to carry oxygen. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes recognizing his family, sometimes lost in a fog of pain and confusion. The brilliant young physicist who had helped build the atomic bomb was now trapped in a body that was tearing itself apart. On September 15, 1945, 28 days after the accident, Harry Daghlian's heart stopped. He was 24 years old. The official cause of death was acute radiation syndrome, but that clinical term doesn't capture what really happened. Harry was killed by a ball of metal he had handled hundreds of times before. He was killed by a single brick slipping from his fingers. He was killed by his own confidence, his own impatience, his own belief that he knew the dragon well enough to tickle its tail one more time. The demon had claimed its first victim, and it was already waiting for the second. Harry's body was buried in a private ceremony. The young physicist who had helped build the weapons that ended the war was gone. Back at Los Alamos, the scientists looked at the core that had killed their colleague. They noted the accident in their reports. They updated their safety protocols. And then, 9 months later, they gathered around the same sphere of plutonium to watch another demonstration. They had learned nothing. 9 months passed. The demon waited. The plutonium sphere sat in its laboratory, warm and patient, holding enough power to level a city. The scientists continued their experiments, continued their measurements, continued their careful dance with criticality. They had lost one man. They told themselves it was a fluke, an accident, a moment of carelessness that wouldn't happen again. They were wrong. On May 21, 1946, exactly 9 months after Harry's accident, a Canadian physicist named Louis Slotin walked into the laboratory. He was about to teach a colleague how to tickle the dragon's tail. It would be his last lesson.